Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Michael Daly back with another episode of the Real 1% podcast where we focus on military to civilian transition. My next guest is another Michael, and he's a Marine Corps veteran, also a Navy veteran. He went from being an enlisted Marine to showing up at the Naval Academy gates, as he liked to say. And, ever since then, he's been off to the races. He was a strike officer. He obviously was an officer in charge as well. He served in Japan all the way to California and in between. How I met Michael was I was actually putting a post up about VRE, as we know as disabled veterans. It's Veterans Readiness and Employment, also known before as Voc Rehab. And I was just testing the waters on what I should do. I finished my bachelor's degree and I was trying to get going with my master's. And he gave me some really valuable information and let me know how he got almost $300,000 of student loans forgiven, being a disabled veteran. And we'll get into that later as well. So ever since that, we've been off to the races. We've been going back and forth. And he actually lives over in Asia with his beautiful wife and his couple children. He got a 3-month-old newborn. Got to see him before we went on. Cool little cat. I remember when my son was that age and that little, and it goes by fast, as I told him. So you got to be on the lookout for them gray hairs coming soon, man, because they're going to be coming, dude. I see you don't have any yet, man. I got a bald spot, and I'm only 35, so be on the lookout. And he jumped into consulting after the Navy, worked for Booz Allen Hamilton. I think it's a great company. I had a little stint with them as well. Obviously, a lot of people know him from Ed Snowden, and he also is in the world of trading. So, if you guys are veterans or you're in the military and you want to think about living abroad and seeing where your money can go in another country, or just, talking about benefits, talking about the Naval Academy, it's just going to be another great conversation. So without further ado, Big Mike, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing?
Not bad, dude. Thanks for asking. So walk us through what made you really want to join the Marines at first, man. Let's start there.
So I was always a kid that, sort of wise beyond my years, if you will, right? With that being said, I didn't get good grades in high school. Some people call it laziness, like whatever, but I kind of figured out I needed discipline, right? And the Marine Corps advertises for that. The military advertises for that. And so I looked at the Marine Corps as an option. And then also my plan was Uncle Sam was going to pay for me to go to school, with option number one being the U.S. Naval Academy. So with that being said, I figured a smaller pool would be applying for the program out of the Marine Corps versus the Navy. So less competition if I did get approved, less people looking at going from the enlisted ranks from the Marine Corps into the Navy, so more opportunity.
What made you have that foresight on that? Because obviously you said you're doing fine in school or whatever, but I mean that's a pretty good plan because you had it all mapped out a couple of years in advance as a young kid. So what really made you put all that stuff together? Was it something that you always wanted to do? Was it just something that you wanted to tackle and move on to the next thing? But what was your outlook on that?
Outlook was pretty simple. I was graduating from high school, and mom and dad were basically like, "You're leaving when you turn 18. Figure something out." And so, hey, you can go join the military. We can't afford to pay for you to go to college. You can go get a job, but if you get a job, you're gonna have to stay here and pay rent. That adult conversation that parents have with their kids. And so I started putting the pieces together. I kind of look at life and making moves like a chess game. And I've been playing chess since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Understanding what the pieces are, learning as much information as you can about them, and then making moves accordingly. And so this particular move worked out. If it hadn't have, there were backup plans. I could take courses while I was on active duty, get a bunch of courses knocked out, and then use the GI Bill to finish up. I was also an avionics tech. So if school didn't work out, I'm sure I could have shown up to an airport somewhere, gone and worked for Boeing or something like that. But it was always about okay, I'm a kid, but I'm not a kid. I got to take care of myself, right? So how am I going to do that? And you start figuring out, what programs are out there to make sure that you can put a roof over your head and keep your belly full.
Yeah, absolutely. So how was your 3 years in the Marine Corps? Did it go by fast? Did you have a good time? Where were you stationed at, and what'd you end up doing?
Yeah, so I went in at that point when you're when you're signing up for contracts for the program that I went under, which was a plus up on the GI Bill, you could go into like an occupational specialty category, right? So I ended up like going into the air wing, but I didn't have a choice of where they were going to assign me. So they ended up assigning me as a aviation electrician / avionics tech. Went to boot camp at Parris Island, follow on training at Camp Lejeune, Camp Geiger. Went from there to Naval Air Station Memphis. I was one of the last classes through there before they moved it down to Pensacola. Went from there to Cherry Point. I was in Cherry Point, North Carolina for like 3 months, and then went out to Yuma, Arizona, and put my application in basically right before I left Cherry Point to get to the fleet, which was a good thing because you get to the fleet and the motivations of the people there are just different. The career specialist ain't really interested in trying to help you out. He's trying to serve the unit, which is, all right, this kid just got here. He hasn't really earned anything. And am I going to really go out of my way to try to get him this shot? It's not good. It's not bad. It just is what it is. Right. So
yeah,
guys that they take care of in units or guys that sit back and impress them. And they're like, okay, well, this guy deserves a shot. I had literally just shown up and applied for another program. And the career specialist was, and this is conjecture, I'm guessing, but I had to have an interview with the officers in the unit, and it had to happen by a certain date. So I got the interview, but he didn't file the paperwork until after the deadline, right? So the interview was good, the paperwork was good, but I wasn't eligible for the program for that year. But I was the first person in line for the following year. So it was like, luckily I had already put my other application in because I think I was applying for some other program at that point in time just to kind of hedge my bets in case I didn't get into the Naval Academy. It was a decent enough junior enlisted guy. I didn't get into any trouble, kept my nose clean, avoided all the traps that a lot of junior personnel sort of run into because I had my eyes set on a goal, right?
Yeah.
At any moment in time, if this does get approved, it can get taken away because, I'm underage drinking or, I came to formation too late or whatever. Sergeant Major ended up looking out for me. He fapped me out. For the folks that didn't serve in the Marine Corps or the Navy, it's a fleet assistance program. They just assign you to a different unit that needs help. So I sat in an office for 4 months working on drug and alcohol for a master gunnery sergeant. And so learn administration. And when you're learning administration, you're learning what rules are and how everything works. There's just a bunch of stuff that most people never figure out. Some people don't figure out until it's a little bit later in their career. But everything that you need to know about whatever branch of service you're in, whatever, the Department of Veteran Affairs, the IRS, it's written down, right? It's written down.
You're right.
So if you take the book and you put some time into reading it, you don't need a law degree to interpret it. You just read it. All right, it pretty much makes this kind of common sense. And if it doesn't, somebody will tell you, right? That's not what that means. It means this. Okay, cool. So I got to learn sort of that stuff, especially about drug and alcohol over that, but that overriding lesson of understanding how the system really worked. At a sergeant in my squadron that he was 20 years old. He was an S1 chief. And administrative chief. But he made sergeant in 3 years, right? That's not common in the Marine Corps at all, especially when you're coming out as a private. And he just got meritorious promotion after meritorious promotion after meritorious promotion. And that was literally, he just sat down one day and read all the regulations on what goes into somebody being eligible for meritorious promotion. And he just did those things.
Yeah.
And I went and talked to him one day, and he was like, here's all the stuff that you need for the board. Don't lose it. Make your own notes, bring it back to me, and make sure your paperwork's good. And so I started following those steps. I sort of incorporated that lesson into everything that I did, including my application and process. I also ran into a bunch of good people along the way, which, when you're focused and you're kind of trying to do the right thing, that kind of happens in life a little bit. So.
No, you're right about that. I was going to ask you, have you always been like goal oriented when you were a younger kid? Did you like do sports, or did you do anything that you said you played chess? That's honestly something I never picked up, but I wish I would have because it seems like it gives you a lot of good strategy, a good way to look at life, a good outlook on it. Just about, it's not about every move counts, but it's not going to happen in one move. So what's your outlook on that? Have you always been like that? Or has your mindset changed over the years?
No, I mean, my father got me into chess pretty young. Like I said, probably started playing when I was about 7. And learning how to play the game is one thing, but learning how to incorporate that into other things that you're doing in your life, that's the sort of skill set that you need, right? Figuring out how all these pieces work, and then how to move them together to accomplish your goal.
Right.
So, I played volleyball in high school, which is weird because, I'm short, but, made the varsity team, ran track, was decent, but just because of kind of how the world works, and the track thing is sort of a perfect example. I was a decent athlete. Now, everybody says that, but I actually was a decent athlete. My problem, my problem was the age groups. I started school early, so I started school at 4 instead of 5, and then the age groups for competitions were 2 years. Well, my birthday's in December, so the guys that I were competing against when I was running track were physically 2 years older and more mature than I was. So I'm running against 16-year-old guys when I'm 14. So no, I didn't get first place. I didn't do any of that stuff. But then I turned 16. And when I'm running against guys that are actually around my age, yeah, I was actually pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. Like, not I'm going to go get a scholarship somewhere kind of a thing, but pretty good. Well, you take that idea, that lesson, and incorporate it into the rest of your life, you figure out pretty quick life's not fair. But you still got to do stuff, right? Like, you still have to go out and compete in all those things. So when you sort of figure that out, it makes more sense to try to be smart and try to play chess with life than trying to override stuff or just play within the system or whatever else. It doesn't take that much in life to get an edge. Nowadays, for anything you want to do, there's YouTube University. You get a library card, go down, spend time in the library, right? There's programs that you can get online, for $50 that will teach you how to go out and create content, right? If that's something that you want to do, all of those things you can build a business or a life around, right? So, there's an answer for it out there if you're willing to go out and put in the time and the energy and the work to do it. And that's what I figured out really, really young, right? So the idea of going to the Naval Academy, I had to look at the fact that I didn't have great grades coming out of high school. So how am I going to get there? Well, one of the ways that I can get there is enlist in the Marine Corps, right? Like, my competition isn't going to be all these high school students. It's going to be other Marines that are trying to do this. There ain't going to be that many of us that apply, right? So, okay, if they accept 20 a year, 25 apply, I think I can do well enough to be one of the 20 out of the 25 that get in. then you get there, you still got to perform. You still got to do what you got to do. I didn't have great grades when I was at the academy. I did well enough to graduate. Graduating got me a job for 5 years in the U.S. Navy. I could have gone back in the Marine Corps, but chose to go in the U.S. Navy for a bunch of different reasons. And, that took me out to Japan, and I had lots of adventures out there. Won't get into all those adventures right now.
Now you must have some good memories because you laughing pretty good. So you get them flashbacks popping in. So that's good, man. What was your time like at the Naval Academy when you got there? Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? Was it hard? I've only talked to one other person, and Valerie. She was a Naval Academy graduate too. She said it was great. So, but I'm interested to hear your take as well.
Okay, so again, we started this conversation, and I was telling them to be completely honest with you. The Naval Academy is not fun. It's not a fun place to go, right? It is, as far as party schools go, it ranks at the bottom of every other school in the nation, and the other two universities down there are West Point and the Air Force Academy, right?
Yeah.
But the mindset that you have to get into, and anybody that's ever been on any kind of deployment anywhere, whether it's been reserve or overseas or in the desert or whatever, you figure out ways to have fun, right? You do, right? You figure out ways to enjoy yourself. The Marine Corps calls it embracing the suck, and that applies to a bunch of different things. But part of that is, all right, I'm stuck in 29 Palms, right? And I'm stationed here for a couple of years. You figure out how to have fun in 29 Palms. I was stationed at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. I figured out how to have fun. The other thing that happens there, again, folks in the military get this, you end up developing very strong, very fast friendships, right? And so when people talk about, oh, the academy was great, they're not talking about the day-to-day. They're not talking about, studying for 24 hours straight because it's finals week. They're talking about the folks that they got close to over the course of that time, and that those common memories that you end up having. There are guys that I've now known for 25 years that I still talk to on a daily basis.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's not, Duke University sitting outside of Cameron Arena waiting for the basketball team to play, camping. It's not that, right?
Not Arizona State.
Yeah, no. But it is an experience that is absolutely unique, and these folks, whether they realize it or not, end up becoming special. There's a lot of folks that end up going to a service academy that are just like, oh, I'm just an average guy. No, you're not, right? You're really not. And that's me being honest about it, right? And that's not to say that other people can't make it through. Anybody with determination can make it through, but there are other ways to kind of get what you want out of life, right? So this is one of those things that's like, and I hate to make this comparison because it's not accurate, but there are guys that go and join the SEALs because they want to test themselves, right? Go through all that stuff, they serve, and then they kind of get out and they go do their thing. Well, this is where the comparison is valid. You put yourself through that force, through that fire, so that when you come out on the other side, you're ready for anything in life, right? And that's what going to a service academy does. You're smart, you understand processes, you understand engineering, you understand your sort of place in the world. You're going to go and be part of a unit where, okay, I'm in charge, but no, I'm not really in charge because there's a sergeant first class or gunnery sergeant here or a chief. He's actually in charge, and I got to do what I got to do to learn from him. So one day I can actually be in charge, right? Kind of understanding that mentality when you get into the workplace, because that's what it is. It's a workplace, right? The difference that you're going to have between a service academy graduate or anybody that served as an officer in the military when you get to your first job post-military career, you join the corporate world. The folks that came straight out of college, they've never had a leadership experience before. They've never had responsibility over multiple million dollars of equipment or people's lives or anything like that. You're walking in with this sense of responsibility because you've done it, right? And especially this last generation, like I graduated in 2001, right before the towers fell. So all of my classmates are war veterans. All of them, did something that, equipment breaks, it actually affects national security, right? You screw up, your guys actually might die, right? That's a lot of responsibility for a 22-year-old to actually have to deal with in bear, right? With a bunch of stuff happening around them that they absolutely can't control. I'll beat up on the Navy for a little bit. The John McCain and one other destroyer, can't remember it right now, had at-sea collisions off the coast of Japan. I know those waters, right? And 20 years ago, when I was in those waters, we were all sitting around talking like, we're not training well enough to be able to do this. Like, there's too much stuff going on because this was right after 9/11. We're in this posture that we have to just run out and do a bunch of stuff, keep doing it. And we weren't putting the proper attention that we needed to seafaring, right? We talked about that for years, and we're all waiting for something bad to happen, and then it finally happened, right? And it was like when the McCain hit, we were all like, yeah, we're just surprised it didn't happen sooner, right? That kind of thing. So when I say that the guys that are in uniform with the bars, the butter bars, the silver bars, whatever else, they generally take their jobs very, very seriously, and they have that kind of responsibility sort of ingrained in them. And then they get out into the corporate world, whether it's in consulting or finance or whatever else. And the guy next to him in their training program, they're more worried about like, oh, well, I may have drank a little bit too much last night. Like they haven't gone out and done something. And I don't want to belittle their accomplishments. It's just that they haven't really gone out and tried to sort of prove to the world anything, right? They haven't had to play that real game of chess in life on average. Now there's special cases with, everything. Like I don't know everybody's story, but yeah, it's just kind of the way the world works.
A couple of things that you said really stuck out. The first one was how the officers have to go and they have a gunnery sergeant, they have an NCO pretty much that's in charge as well, and I don't think that's a mindset that all the officers carry, because I know some of them will get to their unit and think that they're going to run the whole show, and they have the schooling. But that was interesting that you said that and put that in perspective like that. And another thing I wanted to ask you is, what was the hardest thing about the Naval Academy for you? What was, and how did you make it through those tough times?
The hardest thing about the academy for me was the small P political games. The service academies are a leadership laboratory, and so what you have is teenagers to early 20-year-old folks trying to figure out who they're going to be when they actually have troops, right? They're, do I yell? Do I scream? Do I negotiate? Like all the things that you sit back and you try to figure out how you're going to be, right?
Yeah.
Well, you got a guy that's in charge of you, and mind you, I was 2 to 3 years older than most of my classmates. So I'm the same age when I showed up as most of the seniors, right? I had already been out to the fleet, and now I've got a kid that's my age yelling and screaming at me, right? Okay, I can check the ego part of it. That's not a big deal. What was sort of troublesome is I get called to one of my upper classes office or rooms late at night. He starts yelling and screaming at me, right? And I'm like, can you calm down and tell me what this is about, right? Yeah. Anybody that's ever been married, one of the things that you never say to your wife is calm down, right? It's just incites more violence, if you will. So, it shifts from what he's actually yelling at me about to how dare I tell him to calm down. And it's like, I'm not trying to tell you to calm down because I'm trying to mess with your ego. I don't know what you're yelling at me about, right? And I've got to make sure I'm staying calm. And then it turns out he sent an email out and he expected me to respond by a certain time, right? And then I asked him the obvious question, hey, what if I didn't read the email? Like, what then, right? And he didn't have an answer for that. And then I told him, like, we had formation. I grabbed my bag and I left the deck to go study. I didn't get back until 2 minutes ago, and there was a note on my desk to come and see you. So I came and saw you. So I don't even know what you're talking about. You sent me this email that I haven't read. What are we doing here? Right. And so, right. And so you're dealing with that. Now, that's not just like a Naval Academy thing. Like, that's happened with, PFCs and privates in the Army and the Marine Corps getting yelled at by a new sergeant. They have no idea what they're yelled at for, right? The difference is out there, like, you'll generally have a staff NCO that's watching or sees that and kind of pulls the guy aside and says, hey, next time do it this way, right? You're kind of learning as you go. And then you kind of figure out it's probably best to reserve the ass chewings for a time when they're really needed, right? But people sort of figure that out. That's what your whole time at the Naval Academy is, right? And then there's other little things, right? Like, went out drinking at the officers club one night and was just having fun. And then one of my upper class was there and she pulled me aside and she was like, you can't get that wild. And I'm like, I didn't get that wild when everybody was having fun. She's like, yeah, but you got to remember people's eyes are watching. Yeah, I get that. But you're my upper class and you were there. So, like, if you had a problem, why didn't you just stop me? Right. And then you kind of figure out that people don't operate that way. Like, she was just being nice enough to tell me to check myself and make sure that I'm doing the right things in that particular place. Like I said, it's the small p political stuff, right? How you're presenting to other people, how you should present to them. The same stuff that generally affects people out in the fleet, right? Out in the fleet or out in the field, you'll have that guy that whatever unit he's in, he's doing 60 to 80% of the work. Work's getting done. Nobody knows it, right? But the work's getting done. And then you have the guy that, not because he's trying to do the wrong thing, not because he's a kiss ass, but he's just a happy person and he always says hi to the staff sergeant, always says hi to the lieutenant, like whatever, nice guy, right? But he's doing the in your face stuff, right? Where the other guy's actually doing the work. And then it comes to promotion time. What people remember is the guy that was kind of in their face. He didn't do anything wrong, but you got this other guy that the unit cannot actually function without. And then you got this guy over here, and somehow the guy over here gets promoted faster or gets ranked higher. It's like, for the people that know, that makes absolutely no sense. But the thing about it is he's putting in the time. So I didn't play those games. I was the guy that was, whether it was the academy or the fleet, that was putting in the time trying to do the work, and then kind of wondering why is my ranking so low, for this particular thing. And it's like, well, you're not really involved. I'm like, I'm not involved like everybody in my squad that, we're looking at as far as rankings are concerned are in the top 5%. Well, you're not the one doing it. Yes, I am. Right. I check in on my people. I take care of them. I do what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, it is them, but I'm making sure that they're doing that. But somehow or another, I'm getting a C in performance, but everybody that works for me gets an A. That's not making any sense. Right.
Yeah. Not really.
Yeah, that happens out in the fleet as well. Right. So that was the hardest thing for me. Right. Like, people care more about the surface stuff than they actually do about the substance. So
I guess it goes back to what you said earlier. Is life is not fair, right? You're just like, damn, dude, this doesn't really make sense. But yeah, it's unfortunate how that goes sometimes. I'm sure you're happy to graduate and get on to the next 5 years. What did you end up doing after you graduated? Like what type of officer did you become? Because I don't really know how it works in the naval world. But do you get to pick your commission, or do they assign you, or the like top people get to pick theirs? And what did you do for the next 5 years?
Yeah, so you have what's called an order of merit, and it's a combination of grade point average, sort of performance ranking, and a couple other things. Higher your order of merit, the more likelihood you're going to get the job you want. And so you'll select, just like when you're choosing orders somewhere, right? Okay, here are the top 3 places that I want to go. All right, here are the top 3 things that I want to do as far as jobs are concerned, right? The higher your order of merit are, the more likely you're going to get your top choice. I happen to be lucky enough to select pilot as my top choice in the year that the U.S. Navy approved LASIK surgery for people that wanted to be pilots. So I had 2015 vision, but all of a sudden 120 people got added to the roles that were now eligible to be pilots. So didn't work out for me, right? I didn't have grades that were good enough. Didn't work hard enough, right? Like, that is 120% all on me. I lost focus while I was there and shifted from trying to be a pilot to just kind of trying to survive at the school, right? Could have worked harder, could have worked differently, could have done a bunch of different things. But my goal, my focus got shifted from wanting to be a naval aviator, whether it was a pilot in the Marine Corps, pilot in the Navy, to, all right, I just want to graduate. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, no, make too easy. So after you graduated, did you think that were going to stay in the Navy as a career, or were you still, what was your outlook on that?
Right. So I ended up becoming a Navy surface warfare officer, ship driver. And what I decided, again, kind of making these chess moves, if I was going to end up being a SWO, I was going to do my 5 years and get out. That was it. I did not want to do a 20-year career as a ship driver. We just didn't. It's a really, really just hard life. And just not what I had in mind. I would have been happy to do that as a pilot or even as a backseater, but that was the goal. And so, like I said, it didn't work out. All right, I'm going to go do this time and then get out and see what the world has to offer me at that point. So, that's what I did. I went to Japan for 2 years. I was the strike officer on board a old destroyer. So I owned all of the Tomahawk weapon systems. I owned all the Harpoon weapon systems on board the ship. That includes the launchers, personnel, and all the stuff that goes into that.
Okay. When it came time for you to get ready to ETS out of the Navy, did you have a plan? I know you said you had to decide what the world had next for you, but you seem like you always had a plan going into this and going into life. So curious to hear your thoughts and also not only your plan, but what the transition looked like, for you getting out of the Navy.
Yeah. So a friend of mine was doing a biotech startup, and we chatted, and it was, do I get out and immediately come work for you, or do I get out and go get an MBA and then come work for you? And after some discussions back and forth, and then me hedging my bets with them, hey, it would be great to come work for you guys, but if your company doesn't work out, right, if you don't get the funding that you're looking for, then I'm just a guy that just did some time in the service, right? So let me go get the MBA and do the thing. And so I did that, and about halfway through the MBA, the project fell apart. So hedged my bets correctly. The other unfortunate thing was I graduated basically right as the housing crisis went into full swing. So Wall Street wasn't hiring anybody at that point in time. The great thing about being a naval officer and coming from the academy is places, anything in the defense industry, including Booz Allen, you pretty much, walk in, have a couple of good conversations, and they're probably going to hire you. Like, they probably are, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. It was 2008. I got a job with Booz Allen, and had some interesting adventures with them. 6 months later, I got recalled to active duty, and
Really? Damn, dude. How'd that go?
Yeah, I did a deployment over to Kuwait. Again, you figure out how the system works. I got to pick my deployment. So instead of being called upon to go to Afghanistan for a year, go to Iraq for a year, I was like, well, if I volunteer, it's a 7-month deployment, actually, like boots on the ground. And if I find the right unit to volunteer with, I may be able to kind of pick my destination. And so I narrowed it down to 2 units. A bunch of other people figured this out as well. So, like, I'm a smart guy, but, not a genius when it came to this particular thing. The unit that was going to the UAE, they were overloaded by like 20%. So
yeah,
a bunch of other people figured it out too. They're like, yeah, no, sorry, we just don't have any room for you, So they left, and so I ended up going over with a unit that was going to Kuwait. And the other thing that happened at that point, was engaged, sat down and talked with the wife, and she wanted to start a restaurant. And anybody that's taken an MBA, it's one of the things the teachers expressly forbid you to do, right?
Yeah, horrible margins, horrible, dude.
Horrible, right? But she's a classically trained chef and great baker, and okay, we can make a run at this, but logically speaking, one of us needs to have a steady job, right, to make sure the bills are paid for in case the restaurant doesn't work out. In all likelihood, the restaurant will work out, but this is what we'll do. So it was like, well, one of the things I can do is go to law school, right? Go do that thing, come out on the other end of law school, and then just go right back in the Navy, be a JAG officer. And so that's kind of what I started setting stuff up to do. While I was on that deployment, I had to do my application, take the LSATs, like a bunch of other stuff. So while we're doing 12-hour watches and then all the other ancillary duties, I was doing all this other stuff around my application. Actually took the LSAT in Kuwait, just like I took the GMAT while I was deployed to Iraq. But the things you got to do to get what you want. So put in my application while I was deployed, got accepted to College William and Mary Law School. Knew that I had the GI Bill, but also knew that it was a relatively inexpensive law school as compared to others. It's also a highly rated law school, and it's a low cost of living area. So even if I have to take out loans, it's not going to be as bad as if I go to like USC or something like that. So got in, and then when I got back from the deployment, some stuff happened on the deployment. I ended up busting my knee up pretty bad. When I got back, they put me on med hold. So I sat around for a little bit of time, and then the doctor came to me and was like, yeah, you're getting medically discharged from the service. And I was just like, not exactly what I was expecting, and it's kind of screwing with my plans here. And doctor was like, well, you can fight me, but understand that, yeah, I've never lost one of these in case you decide to appeal. I'm like, okay. And then he kind of gave me the other news, like, this will make you fully eligible for the new GI Bill. And I was like, well, I would have been fully eligible anyway because I, deployed, but well, right. But this will cover your law school, and then you're going to get a severance check from the service, and like all these other good things will happen. I was like, right. But I don't get to finish my career, as a JAG officer and whatever. He goes, well, you'll get it figured out. Okay, cool. So left, went to law school. GI Bill covered that. Still took out student loans for other reasons. The wife decided she changed her mind about starting the restaurant and wanted to go to school, and she also didn't want to work. So, yeah. So now instead of taking that severance and applying it to some other stuff, like I used it to pay off debts, but we lived on that and student loans over the course of the 3 years I was in law school. So it put me in a pretty bad shape financially. And then I was also working on getting my disability rating up, through various means, right? So got it up to 90% and started looking at, the stuff that we had talked about as far as the disability discharge. And I was like, I'm just kind of stuck right now. Like, I'm not going to be able to get this discharge. So I'm stuck at 90%. Later on, tried it again. This is well after law school. But I was like, I can take another shot at this, and went ahead and did it, got my claim filed, and it all ended up working out. The day that I got my 100% disability back, celebrated, and then the next day put in my disability discharge. That was on my birthday. And then the next day I was like, well, you know what? I still got like a grip of private loans too. Why don't I just call them and see if they'll discharge this? So I called them, and they were like, yeah, we'll go ahead and take care of that. I was like, okay.
Wow.
So I was like, let me ask the question. The only thing they can say is no. And they were like, no, yeah, we'll take care of it. So like January 1st, I got the notice that, yeah, all of your paperwork is in and complete, and we're starting the process to discharge your $295,000 of student loan debt. And that was between the MBA and law school. All went up in smoke. And then I spent the next 4 months or so after that getting my credit report in order. There's a bunch of stuff that happens when you're dealing with loans that everybody has to be in sync about. And when they're not, that just sits on your credit report. And they're like, oh, it's not affecting your rating. And I'm like, no, it is. So I'm going to go ahead and insist that you take this off. I had to go through the loan paperwork to find out who the guarantors were, look up the guarantors, call the guarantors on the loans, and let them know that my debt had been discharged and that they were now released from the guarantee. So if they could go do that, Navient could go ahead and cancel the rest of the debt. And like I said, that took me like 4 months to get done. But yeah.
So I got to go back a little bit real quick. And first I wanted to ask you, what was your initial feeling when they called you back for that deployment?
So when you're in the reserves and you kind of figure out how the game is played, like I was safe for a long time, right? Like for the reservists, for people that haven't been in the reserves, you have a thing that's called above the line and below the line. When you're above the line, you're considered essential personnel and you're part of the unit. And like if the unit goes, you go, but they can't pull you out of the unit and send you somewhere else. My unit got bracked, like the base got bracked, and then they just decided not to move my unit. So they had to relocate me to another unit. Well, when they relocated me to another unit, I was now below the line. There are things that you can control, things you can't control. They were willing to put me above the line, but they had to file paperwork for the new unit that I was in. Badgered the CO over 3 months. He just never got around to filing the paperwork. I asked him over and over and over again. He just never got around to filing it. So by the time he did get the paperwork in, oh, sorry, you've already been moved over to this other unit. They're deploying at this point in time. All right. Can I try to figure out how to get this done some other way? And they were like, yeah. And so I started looking at all these other units to try to get this obligation taken care of with, and ended up going with the unit that I got assigned to. It worked out. Like, you know, of all the places in the Middle East to go, when you're on the back end of your career, Kuwait ain't a bad place to be, you know, versus the guys that are sitting in Iraq or the guys sitting in Afghanistan. And so,
no, absolutely not. What about when you got that call, or what about when you got the word that you got 100% on top of when you could get your all that student loan forgiveness? What was going through your mind then? You said you pardoned a little bit when you got the 100, but I mean that must have been like a huge weight off your shoulder, dude.
Yeah. I went through a relatively bad divorce, and part of that recovery was finding kind of the next good girl, right? And it's not that she was the one that kind of convinced me to try again, but it was like, well, for her, I'm going to try again, right? Um, you know, what it meant was a couple extra bucks to help take care of our burgeoning family and that kind of thing. So I was like, all right, well, this isn't gonna take much for me to file some paperwork. So filed the paperwork, did another sleep study, a couple other things, did what I had to do. And then when it worked out, it was like, oh, well, I'm going to take you shopping. So for my birthday, I took her shopping, but it wasn't like your regular shopping adventure. It was a cocktail party in a high-end secondhand store. I don't know if people have done those before, but it's like the rich folks that wear the Louis Vuitton once, I can never wear this again. They take it down to a secondhand store, and then those folks turn around and sell it for like 80% off.
Where are they at? Because I sell clothes on eBay, so I need to know where that store is, man. I'm about to go buy all that.
There's a bunch. Yeah, there's a bunch of them in St. Louis. They did a wine. My company sponsored a wine and cheese party there as part of a fundraiser, right?
Okay.
And so they were getting part of the proceeds from everything sold, and it was cool, right? It was a nice little event. There's a violinist there, and just nice atmosphere. And so I'm sitting around, sipping some wine and having good cheese from one of those fat charcuterie boards, with all the meats and whatever else. She's running around the store finding shoes and like all this stuff. So basically, like, between her and her kid, I dropped like $450 that night just to celebrate, like, hey, this new thing's happened and it's awesome. Kind of laughed. I was like, yeah, for my birthday, I took you shopping. It was just kind of a funny thing that I would say to her periodically. But yeah, it helped a lot. When part of it's the obvious financial reward, but the other part of it is the time and the effort and the energy that you put into trying to figure out something that finally works out after years and years and years of trying to make it happen. You pull that off and it's like, all right, finally I've arrived at the mountaintop, and so
right.
That happened. And yeah, absolutely glad of it.
When you got out of the Navy and got the medical discharge, what disability percentage were you at then?
So I got 10% for the Navy, right? And then, so the first time that I got out, the first time I got off of active duty, I had 3 knee surgeries at that point. A bunch of other just stuff, overuse injuries, etc. This was, deployment to Iraq and a couple other things. But I got out at like 30%, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that you realize is like, I probably should have paid more attention in TAP class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, I get recalled to active duty. Now I got an opportunity to do that all over again. So that time I went to TAP class twice, right? I applied to vocational rehab the first time, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to accept you. I'm like, but I meet all the criteria. And they're like, program doesn't really work that way. You still got GI Bill. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So I just used my Montgomery GI Bill to go through business school, right? Instead of using voc rehab, which would have paid for everything. So, you make less, you make mistakes, not because it's the actual mistake, like you did something wrong, you just didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And so going back into the service the next time, I went to TAP class twice, right? I dug in and looked at all the paperwork for voc rehab, for the GI Bill, for everything that I was trying to do that time, like I did the first time when I went to the Naval Academy, understanding what all the programs were about, understanding what those orders were, basically memorizing them. So doing that level of that depth of work again, this time, and applying again. Well, voc rehab said no the second time, right? Well, next time that I went and applied for voc rehab or BRNE, I had run out of GI Bill. Okay, I got a year left of law school, and I see this coming. So this time I went down there, and I'm like, hey, yeah, this is what's going on. I'm like, yeah, well, we're going to deny you, da-da-da-da. And I knew the M28R inside and out, right? I knew the Code of Federal 38 Code of Federal Regulations inside and out, right? And I start quoting this stuff to this guy. He goes off on me and starts screaming and yelling at me, right? And I kind of had to stop myself, got up and walked out of the room. But like he was yelling so loud at me that people were coming out of their offices like, what's going on? And, I went to the staff and I was like, you guys need to take care of that because I don't necessarily have PTSD, but if he goes off on the wrong vet that way, you're going to have a murder scene here. And they were like,
straight. Yeah, you're right about that.
So I left and I immediately got to work, like typing up what happened and all this stuff. You go to battle against the VA, you got to know your stuff inside and out. I've gone to battle against the VA, right? So in this particular case, I basically filed an appeal and the VA never responded, right? By the time they responded, they were well outside of their response window, which basically means the case is automatically supposed to be decided in my way, right? Well, they sent me to a shrink and I go to the shrink. She writes up her report. Next thing I know, my disability percentage goes up again, right? And so it was like, well, this didn't work out the way that you guys thought it was going to work out, right? Once they got that report back, they were the nicest folks in the world. Come back in the office, we'll get everything figured out. That whole thing took 11 months. So it was from January until the beginning of December. The following January, I'm out of GI Bill, right? So they're like, yeah, we're approving your program. Everything's good to go. But it literally happened just in time. And that was with me contacting congressional representatives in my state and outside of my state, both senators and congressmen, calling the office of the president, like basically yelling and screaming like the VA is breaking the rules. And they got a lot of pressure for it. And I started having conversations with, hey, this is how this stuff is going to work out, right? But again, the mindset is keep digging and keep interpreting the rules that are on the books because they work for you, right? It's not just that agency or that system or that person saying, hey, here's what you can't do. It's you looking at it and saying, no, this is what I can do and moving forward from there.
Yeah, and really, I gotta say, good job for not giving up, man. A lot of people do. A lot of people would have had that conversation. They would have either snapped or just got up and they said, oh, the VA don't want to do nothing. But I had to contact my congressman too with my voc rehab counselor at first because you go in there and some people might have a great experience, right? It's good and bad like with everything. But for me, I wanted to do this and then I changed my mind. It's life, right? Mm-hmm. You change your mind, you have a change of heart. First, you might be like, oh, I want to get in this to get the ball rolling, but hold on a minute. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Well, no, you can't change. I can't change. It's life, dude. You're not going to tell me I can't change my mind and change the degree plan and you can't do a little bit more paperwork. And some of those counselors act like they're gatekeepers, and it's like their money that you're taking away when really it's there for us veterans. So, if you listen to this, just don't give up on yourself and actually have a plan before you go in there. Like you said you knew the M28R, and if you're doing disability, you know the CFR 38. It's all in black and white, like you said before we started the conversation. Everything is the tax code. You got to know it. If you're in business, you got to at least know it so you can talk that language with your accountant or just know it for the sake of knowing it. Laws, it's all the same. It's in black and white, but it's up to us to do the due diligence. And dude, it's all there. But but yeah, good for you, man. I mean, I always try to tell my friends about stuff and like one of my buddies, he wasn't getting the answer. I said, dude, call the congressman. I guarantee you're going to get a call back, an email, or a letter in the mail. I promise you will in pretty short time. So that's a damn shame, though, dude, to be honest with you. You can't even really sugarcoat it. Like, that's why so many people discredit the VA and all the VA is not essentially bad. Is there bad people in there? Sure, but there's bad people everywhere. There's bad people in the Navy and the Army.
I got to push back a little bit, right? The thing that I think people need to understand, right? Everybody at any point in time that's ever had a job in the military or out has gone through the same thing. You show up, you have a training officer, training person that shows you how to do the job.
Yeah.
You also have a book that tells you how to do the job. Most people just listening to the training person that says, hey, this is how you got to do this, right? But that's everywhere. That's included in working for the VA or the IRS or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
So 9 times out of 10, the person that's telling you no is telling you no because they never picked up the book. They never opened it up. They just did what the training person told them to do.
Right.
So the point in all of this is if you pick up the book and you read it and you know their job better than they do, they can't tell you no. They can get mad, they can huff, they can puff, they can do all that other stuff. But it's like, no, here on this line right here, it says you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. I don't understand why you don't get that. Right. They'll get mad, right? That's what the guy was yelling at me about. Well, I'm the one that determines. It's like, yeah, well, it also says that I can talk to a supervisor if I'm not getting the answer that I want from you, and it says it right here.
Yeah.
You can't talk to a supervisor. Yeah, I got that, man. I'm gonna go ahead and leave now before you do something stupid or I do something stupid. But the bottom line is everybody's got the same opportunity to dig through the books.
Right.
And read them. And here's the other thing, right? You're doing yourself a favor and you're doing the other person a favor by doing all the work for them. Okay. The part that I think is unfair, right? I was 2/3 of the way through law school. I knew how to write a legal brief. I knew how to incorporate evidentiary stuff, right? You know, here's this paragraph, here's this line, here's how to interpret it. I could put that in a full-blown legal brief, and I did. In doing that, I'm doing all the work for anybody. Like if you're following my interpretation, you have no choice but to come to the conclusion that I want you to come to, right? The problem for most vets, again, got an MBA, got a law degree, got a degree from the Naval Academy. I ain't most vets. Okay?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of vets out there that aren't like me, that don't have that level of education, don't know how to write in that sort of specific directed way. That's the part to me that's unfair. You can hire a lawyer, you can go talk to DAV or one of the other vet service organizations. But again, most of those folks are also in the same position where some training dude taught them how to do their job instead of them going ahead and doing the work. So it's kind of like owning a business. You said this a little while ago. It's kind of like owning a business where you're doing stuff. Your accountant may know how to be an accountant, but you got to understand what questions to ask them to get to the right conclusion, which is the same thing with this. If you read the stuff, you take notes, you do those kinds of things, you can kind of direct them to to where you want to go, and it makes everybody's life easier. It just really does.
Absolutely, dude. And good. I appreciate you sharing that as well. I got to go back a little bit to when you first got out of the Navy and ask you a couple of questions I always like asking the vets that come on is like, one, what did sick call look like? You said you busted your knees up a couple of times, your knee, and had a couple of surgeries, but like, what did the process look like? And also, like, to get out, did you know about VA disability? Did you have some good mentors or leaders along the way that made sure to tell you, hey, make sure you get this documented? I mean, you were in a little bit earlier than I was, but what did that look like for you?
So I already knew to make sure that my medical record was tight coming out of the service because of like what was going to happen with the VA. Now, I had no idea what that was, didn't know what that looked like, but that's just stuff that people in the service, like people that I was with in the Marine Corps, enlisted in the Marine Corps with, right? Always let me know. You got to do this stuff. You got to make sure it's done. So I carried that all the way through my time, made sure my medical record was always up to date. Made sure basically all my records were up to date. So like as an officer, the entire time that I was in, No superior ever wrote my fitness report, ever. I always wrote them, right? And I put down the exact grade that I wanted. And I was honest with myself and trying to be honest with them about it. The only thing that they would change is my ranking, right? But they would pretty much never change the writing on the fitness report. So I knew what was going in. That was always tight wherever I took it. Everything that got filed was always tight. And again, it's one of those things where you're counting on people being lazy, right? So if I write this up the right way, then they're not going to change anything because that gives them work to do, right?
Okay.
So I learned that really, really early on. That was one of the things that I learned from the sergeant that was meritoriously promoted a bunch of times. It's like, dude, you can do all this stuff. It's not rocket science, right? Just go through what the requirements are and you write them all up. Okay, cool. So instead of just putting down a number, I would just go ahead and write the whole eval up, right? And they would change some stuff, but very rarely did they just throw the whole thing out. And I can't remember, honestly, a time where they ever actually just threw the whole thing out. They would incorporate all my stuff into it. What that makes you do is take responsibility for your career while you're in, and you sort of carry that over into everything else that you do as you leave the service.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing in the Army with like NCOERs and OERs. Sometimes you get stuck. It's sad though because it's a double standard. Is that being like a non-commissioned officer, you're in charge, or even an officer like you had subordinates, right? That you were writing all those reports for, doing those counselings, and they expect those done on a monthly basis. When it comes time to get your checklist and your NCOER report, no one wants to see you do the work unless you have a good leader. But it seems like. Yeah, so that always stuck out to me as like, damn, dude. And what are they going to say? You check them like, oh, did you do the 2166-8-1? Oh, you didn't? So how are you going to give me how can you even tell me what I'm going to get? I must be a 1/1 because you have nothing saying anything otherwise. So, yeah, that's kind of wild. I'm sure plenty of other people have had the same experience. So, all right, so let's fast forward a little bit until what made you go overseas, man, living overseas? Like, when did you get over there and what made you decide to take the endeavor?
So I was stationed in Japan for 2 years. We traveled, all over here, stopped in different places. And I always had it in my mind to come back to this side of the world and spend time, right? And so been working on being a trader for a really long time. And was putting time in St. Louis, trying to get this whole thing figured out, living off the disability, right? And I got a budget that I got to be tight about, right? And try to make this thing work. Okay, cool. Well, a bunch of things happen all at once. I got a phone call from a buddy, and he was basically like, when are you getting over here? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to get this thing done. And he's like, yeah, I know you have it in your head that you have to get this thing done and then come over here. But what I'm telling you is just come over here and then get this thing done. It's easier that way for you, right? Life's a lot more chill over here. The money goes a long way. And I'm just kind of like, that logic is undeniable. So, started looking at it right around the same time as that conversation. I started having conversations with my neighbors, and everybody's talking about how their rent's going up $300 to $500 per month. COVID froze rents in a lot of places, and you had two choices. You could gradually increase them from there, or in the case of my landlords, they're like, yeah, we're just going to do 4 years of rent increases all at once. And I was like, people are getting shot in my neighborhood, and I don't need to be here anymore. Right, especially for another $300 a month or whatever it is. Like, this place is good for $900 a month, and it was a really nice place in downtown St. Louis. For $1,200 a month, I'm sorry, I can't get there, right? And so it's like, well, if I'm gonna move, why would I go sign another lease somewhere else? Why not just take off? So that one other thing happens, kind of unimportant. It was basically I had a tentative, I had an offer to have a conversation about a job offer. I was supposed to meet somebody and have a conversation about whether I was going to go work for them or not. And we just never got around to having a conversation. So it was like, well, like that's the only reason that I would have stayed here. So yeah, I'll just sell all my stuff off and, stay with a friend for a couple of weeks and then fly on over. So, put all my stuff that I absolutely needed in 2 suitcases and got on a plane, a year and a week ago, 53 weeks ago, and landed, and then everything just kind of moved fast from there. My wife now is the first native person that I met here, and it was just sort of an instant connection. And we got married in July and had a baby right after that. It took me a while to convince her that being married was probably a good thing for us.
Yeah.
But she finally accepted, and we had a nice little ceremony, and now I'm in the process of doing things that expats do, like going to the embassy to get my daughter's birth certificate, and going back to the embassy to get her a passport, and little adventures like that. The thing about living over here, you got to decide what it means to live, right? And I mean, in a big picture, right? What does it really mean to live? Are you just trying to struggle from paycheck to paycheck, make sure that you got a roof over your head and enough food in your belly to get you to the next paycheck? Or are you really trying to enjoy life? If you're really trying to enjoy life, that's rather difficult in the United States, without working a 40 to 60 hours a week job, right? For most people, it's kind of impossible. When you keep talking about the middle class disappearing and poor people struggling and all that kind of stuff, like that happens, right? It's just the reality of our time. Over here, I'm in a 2-bedroom house with a yard, and I'm paying $250 a month for rent.
That's wild.
Right, like my utility bills here are $190 a month, and that's because we blast one air conditioner basically 24 hours a day. I mean, I live basically in the jungle. I live near the water, but I live in the jungle. So, it's over 90 degrees here. Okay, great. I'm blasting an air conditioner, but it's still only costing me $180 a month. So all in, I'm paying less than $400 a month, for a 2-bedroom house, all the utilities, internet, all that other kind of stuff. You think about where you can do that in the United States. I don't think you can, right? I honestly don't think you can, like really, really can. And it's not a small house. It's not a dump. It's nothing like that. It's just, it's an average house. I'm not living high off the hog here or anything, but that's more because I'm being responsible. There are guys that come over here, other parts of Southeast Asia, that will pay $1,000 a month for rent, but they're paying $1,000 a month for rent for like 6-8 bedroom house on property overlooking the water. Like, it's just one of those things. It's one of the places in the world where the dollar just stretches a really, really long way. I know a couple of guys over here that are more hippie type of folks. They spend less than $10 a day on food, right? Like, so, when you can come over and survive in a place with $400 or $500 a month, right? And you can do that here. Kind of got to really think about what it means to live, right? The same guys that are living over here for $400 or $500 a month can also pick up and get on a plane and go to Singapore and hang out there for a week. They're going to spend more than $400, in that week. But if they don't like Singapore, they can go to Thailand. If they don't like Thailand, they can go down to Indonesia and hang out in Bali. If they don't like it there, they can go to Malaysia. You've got that opportunity to do that in places like this. You can do the same thing, I think, in Portugal, or if you go down to South America, the same thing. I just happen to pick Asia, over some of the other places, but you go to where your dollar stretches the furthest and where they treat you the best. And I pay attention to some of the politics stuff that happens in the States now, the wackiness, the zaniness that's happening, how passionate people are, and all that other kind of stuff. But I can choose at any point in time to turn off my Facebook feed and extricate myself from that. I don't have to get involved and get stressed out about it, where people that are living in the United States right now, it's just in their face, all the time. And it's tough,
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when we first talked about like what you were paying and everything, I was like, damn, that's pretty good, man, because you get that disability goes a long way, and then when you get your training stuff off and running, you could do it. I mean, opportunities are endless over there, really. And you're being responsible, which is good. Even if you weren't, like, even $1,000 is still, if you had a mansion with the 8 bedrooms, it was still cheaper than living in St. Louis. So and getting gunshot. I mean, I was gonna say St. Louis is nice downtown. My buddy lives down there, but it's not the best place either. So. Crazy, man. It's not getting any slower either. The interest rates are rising, the houses are getting more expensive, and I mean, they put it in context, like a $500,000 house with 3% interest rate would have been like, I don't know, just say like $2,000, something like that. Now it might be over $3,000. So it's like with that interest rate going up. So, you got a lot of veterans. Have you met over there, or a lot of U.S. veterans, or not really?
Yeah, so I live in a quiet little town, sort of a eco tourist type spot. One of my good friends here, he's actually a retired Marine. A couple other guys I've run into, Army, Air Force. You get towards the capital, there's a lot more there, and then there's a lot of folks over in Thailand. Just a lot of folks over in Thailand. Like Vietnam used to be pretty big for that too. I met this retired Navy captain that actually owned a business in Vietnam when I first got here. Things had kind of gotten tough for him because Vietnam changed a lot of laws around their visa program, and so he had to do border runs every month. Literally just had to leave the country for 2 or 3 days in order to get back in, but he had a full-fledged business running where he was exporting stuff to the States. So yeah, I mean, there are expat communities usually thick with veterans all over Southeast Asia. Huge population of them over in the Philippines. You just have to figure out what you're getting into and understand what you're getting into, right? So where I'm lucky that I'm paying rent like really, really cheap, right? In order to send my kids to good schools, I got to pay $100-$200 a month, right? I don't mind that because, my kids are worth it. But it is an expense, right? It's not one of those things where, I could send them to the local sort of state-run school, but it's not really worth it, kind of a thing.
It's better than paying like $500, $800, $1,000 a month in the States too. So you're always you're always benefiting essentially, So that's not bad.
Yeah, so like $100 a month. Let me see, is $100? It's about $150 a month per kid if I'm averaging it out over the 3 months to go to private school, right? But it's private school, right? You got a student-to-teacher ratio that's 20-1. They're learning the local language and they're learning English at the same time. Got to wear cute little uniforms. We got to get them back and forth to school. So there's no school buses, right? Unless the school is providing that service. So like I said, you just have to get here, sort of here or wherever you're going, experience the life, and then figure out like what adjustments that you're going to have to make as far as your expectations are concerned. Once you do that, if you're a single guy or gal without kids, You don't have to worry about that stuff, or like, your kids have finally gotten out of the nest. You don't have to worry about that. You come over here, you're living well. I got a friend of mine that she's 100% disabled, was a cop, got horribly injured as a police officer. So she was forced to retire from her police force, medically retired from there, and getting Social Security. So she's clearing a stupid amount of money per month. If she were to come over here, sky's the limit. You start a business, buy land, travel. Like she could fly out of the airport here every weekend and go somewhere, right, and still have money to burn when she got there. She was originally talking about going to Bali, and they showed me the place they were talking about moving into. It's a 5-bedroom palatial estate on a mountaintop overlooking the ocean, right? I was like, well, how much is that? They said it was like $1,500. I'm like,
damn.
All right,
for real.
Their plan was to like move in there and then bring a couple of other folks, like, other people in there too, have them rent out bedrooms, right? It's something that you can do. So, you got to understand or really sit back and think about what the quality of your life is going to be, or what you want it to be, and figure out if the States is the right thing for you, right? And it's not that the States is good or bad or whatever. I still take advantage of the economic system that is the United States, the most powerful economic engine that's ever existed in history, right? But if I can take that money and then live in this economy and do it, it's not much different than, me living in the middle of Illinois or the middle of Missouri, but having a remote job out of New York, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a little different, but
no, same concept. And you seem like you're happy and you're enjoying yourself. You got a family and you're doing your thing. So I might have to get over there, man. I got to get my passport renewed, but I might have to take you up, man. Get on a plane to come over there. I've only been to Pakistan, Afghanistan. All the stands, dude. I'm trying to get somewhere else over there, dude. But what's on the horizon for you now? What's some of your dreams and some of your goals that you're still working on that you haven't got to yet?
So if anybody's ever interested in being a professional day trader, highly advise you to go do something else, because kind of once it gets into the blood, it's
for real, dude. Professional,
but it is a profession that will make you look at every aspect of your soul and of your character. And so if you can be a successful trader, you kind of conquered yourself. And that's what I'm still working on. When I am to the point where I get this thing figured out and accomplished, sky's the limit, right? What I want for my children here is for them to have opportunity, for them to have choice. They can stay here, or they can, possibly go to the States, possibly go to England. They've got the opportunity, or they've got the ability to make that choice, or they will have it. And what I want to do is, once they make that choice, be able to support that with what I've done, in life, right? So if they're like, I want to go to school in California, or I want to go to school in Singapore, I don't want it to be in a position where it's like, oh, sorry, you can't do that because I can't afford it, or I can't figure out a way to get that done for you. I got time to get all that stuff figured out. If they want to stay here and start a business, same thing. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get that done? That's what I want to do. When I get to the point where, like, I'm sort of kind of actually retired, want to travel, want to go see stuff, want to explore as much of this region of the world and the rest of the world as I can. Don't have any dreams about getting Bugattis or any of that stuff. Just want to go see stuff, and that's kind of how I've always been.
Not bad, dude. I mean, Bugatti would be nice, but with all those millions, you could travel the world around a couple times, dude. You can always rent one, man, if you need to. Just rent it for a day. You know what I mean? Not bad. So, No, man. First, I want to tell you thank you, for coming on here, sharing your stories, being vulnerable, opening up, and giving us some knowledge. I know I've definitely learned a lot from you in the little time I've known you, and look forward to still staying connected with you and seeing how your business takes off, and one day maybe visit. But I just want to open it up to you and see if you had anything, like any closing remarks for maybe anyone in the military, maybe people that are out stuck, just whatever you want, whatever might be on your mind, go ahead and let them have it.
I don't have much more to say than I have. I kind of felt like I rambled a little bit, but
you good.
I think when you're trying to speak truth, it just kind of comes out the way that you're speaking it. So, for everybody that is listening, it's like I'm trying to be as honest as I can be about my story. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out through Mike. I'm glad to try to be there and help out other people with trying to figure this whole thing out. My relationship with you started with you asking a question and me saying, all right, well, yeah, let me go ahead and answer this question, right? And I've had a similar conversation with a couple of other people that were in remarkably similar situations to you. Like, I'm going to school and I'm trying to figure out how to manage everything going on in my life, and it's hard, and I'm not sure if I can do this, and X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, have you tried this? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a thing. Here's the information that you need. Just go ahead and follow through with it. And taking 3 minutes, 5 minutes to ask those couple of questions, like, you can remarkably affect somebody else's life and sort of lift them up that way. So like I said, if I can do that for a couple other people, I'm happy to do it. And if people got stuff out of my story that helps them with that, hey, that's awesome too. I think that the world is just a better place when we are all trying to help each other out, because we all kind of know a little bit about each other's stories. So yeah, that's it. I'll get off my soapbox and let everybody know.
No, you good, man. No, dude, I can't lie. When I asked that question and you answered, I was like, I don't believe it. I was talking to someone yesterday, and it's kind of like when you hear something you want to believe, but you got to hear it like 3 times. So I'm like, I got to look at it. You like, nah, Google it. You show me the website. I'm like, all right, this is for real. And when I told other people, just don't believe it though, dude. When you tell that, because it sounds too good to be true, man. Usually people are getting shafted from the VA, or so they think they are, but this isn't even a VA thing. It's a federal, the governmental thing. So it's like, wow, this is actually true. But that just goes to show how much other people like you, and we all have value, man. Everyone has value. Everyone has greatness within inside of them, but it's up to us to communicate, to share. Like, we're all connected. We're so connected, dude. You're in Asia, but you still answered my question on Facebook that I asked from Florida. So it's like, it doesn't really matter where you are. The information's out there, but it's up to all of us to do our due diligence. And, you can't blame anyone but yourself at the end of the day. That's what I like to say, because our life's in our hands, essentially. Believe in God. If God has control, He got a path for us. If you don't, then that's fine. It's not here for a religious debate. But I just want to say thanks again, for helping me. And, like you said, I did the work, but you gave me the information. So I appreciate that. And hopefully we can continue to help as many veterans and people as we can. So thanks for coming on, brother.
Good. Cheers, brother.
Sir, hey, and thanks everyone for listening to another episode. If you guys know any veterans or anyone in the military space that wants to come on here and share stories, I'd be happy to have them on. All your voices matter. All your stories matter. So until next time, I hope you guys have a blessed one. Take care.